Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes. I'm talking with Anjana Vakil. She's a technologist and software developer at Uber Research. How are you?
Hi, doing great. Thanks.
You have got a video online that I would encourage everyone who enjoys great talks, great podcasts, great teaching. And I'm going to make you feel bad because I'm gushing. You have a YouTube. It's called Learning Functional Programming with JavaScript. It was a talk you did last year, almost a year to the day. And it's just a great, solid 30 minutes that puts functional programming like for humans out there. That talk now has almost 500,000 views. Why did that talk pop when so many other talks just get a couple hundred views and we forget about them?
Well, that talk is funny. So that talk was given at a conference called JS Unconf, which follows the kind of bar camp or unconference format where no talks are scheduled and people just get up at the beginning of the day and kind of pitch the talks that they could give or would like to give, and everybody votes and selects the talks they want to see. And I think one reason that the talk is so popular is that there was a ton of interest, and there still is, in functional programming among the web developer community, because it's something that, there's been all these cool functional frameworks and functional front-end languages coming out, and it sort of was taken for granted that everyone understood what that meant. And I think a lot of people, had never worked in a functional mindset in that paradigm before. So I was at this conference and people were interested in a talk on functional programming and nobody was proposing one. So I said, well, all right, I just recently learned a little bit about functional programming. Let me share with you what I've learned. And I think it was about 6 months after I first encountered functional programming as a thing. And I think the fact that it was my approach to take people along with me on what I had gathered as a normal person, non-expert in computer science, not an expert in type theory or all of these, crazy Haskell programmers that have been doing pure functional programming day in, day out for 20 years. The fact that I was just, some person trying to wrap her head around functional programming, and I was able to kind of walk people through the things that I had struggled with and how I'd learned to wrap my head around them. I think people like those kind of talks. I know I love seeing those kind of talks at conferences. So I hope, we see that trend continue and we see more talks from kind of a everyday person perspective instead of the I am the expert and I will explain everything to you perspective.
That's actually what the show tries to do. That's like what every talk that I've ever done tries to do. So I love that you appreciate that, like presenting from on high is so different from like, hey, look at this cool thing I just discovered. Like the enthusiasm is infectious.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, that's something that for me gives me a lot of motivation of, when I'm surrounded by people that are just excited about what they're doing and not trying to show that it's something super hard that only geniuses and rock stars and ninjas and whatever can do. I think, when you have somebody who's like, hey, let's sit down and look at this because it's really awesome and I just learned it. That is something that, motivates me. And I see a lot of other people out there being motivated by that kind of energy as well. So I think, if we want to build a stronger community altogether, we need to start talking to each other more on that level and less on I will now, explain to you all of the ways in which my superior brain has grappled with problems that are too hard for you to understand.
Yeah. When I talk to companies about what it means to be inclusive, people always think it's about race and gender, but it's also about, do we need to make everyone feel bad? Like, yes, maybe I've been working on data sets in SQL for the last 10 years, but I'm doing good work. I'm doing amazing work. Do you have to come and say monad within 5 minutes of meeting me?
Oh,
right?
monad.
And now I'm like, what's a monad? And I'm feeling bad about myself. Like inclusivity is about letting everyone make technology part of their life.
Absolutely. And, none of us know everything about everything. None of us know everything about functional programming or any particular subfield. It's the space that programming and computer science touches on nowadays, given the advances in the last, 50 years, 100 years in these type of problems. It occupies just way too much space. There's no way for one person to have it all in their head. And we really need to stop thinking that that's possible or the goal. There's no reason that you need to know everything. You just need to know, who to go ask when you need to know something more specific about a particular problem. And,
now, I think that you downplay your expertise a little bit. You have a master's degree. And you study speech recognition and machine learning and natural language processing and all of that kind of stuff. There's still a little bit of a barrier to entry, don't you think, for something like a topic like functional programming and JavaScript? Or were you really just off the top of your head, put out an awesome talk in a half an hour?
No, well, I mean, one aspect of that is that my background is rather eclectic. So I have a BA in philosophy. Which I didn't start out as a programmer. I wasn't programming when I was in college. I had done a little bit of, blogging and modifying my HTML and styling things with CSS and whatnot. But I hadn't really done much actual programming in terms of telling the computer to execute things. And so I was a philosophy student. I was always in love with different foreign languages. I loved linguistics. I became an English language teacher. I was teaching English as a foreign language for several years, and I love teaching. And I think teaching is a skill that sometimes people think of these quote unquote soft skills. I really don't like the term, but they think of them as somehow opposite to the technical skills, the quote unquote hard skills that you need to be a badass ninja functional programmer. I think they're not at all. I think, the more people that can talk about the technology that they're using and the technology that excites them, in a way that makes it accessible to other people, that's exactly the inclusivity, that you were talking about. We need to include people in the software that we're working with, the software that we're building. And so as a teacher, I kind of had that always in the back of my mind, this idea of talking to people about what I'm doing, of helping them come with me on my learning journey. And so when I started programming, just before I went into grad school for computational linguistics, I gravitated towards resources that made it really friendly and accessible. I think the first time I really sat down and tried to teach myself some programming. I wasn't teaching myself. I was using a book, I think from the Head First series with O'Reilly, which is a series I like in terms of they try to make it an engaging and interesting walkthrough of kind of basic programming concepts. And they have a whole series, but I found that actually got me into programming, whereas the first time I tried to take a computer science class in college, I dropped it after a couple of weeks because it was just so uninviting. It was just so sterile and dry, and there was no community to speak of people getting each other excited about it. So it wasn't until much later that I found that community. And I studied in the academic world, things like machine learning, as you mentioned, speech recognition, and the software that I was using to do the research that I was working on, started interesting me a lot. Actually a lot more than kind of doing the actual research. And so I started getting curious about software engineering as more of a discipline and kind of filling in the gaps in my computer science knowledge, since I didn't have that formal background. And I eventually found myself at a really amazing place in New York City called the Recurse Center.
Recurse, like recursion?
Exactly. Recurse Center. It's at recurse.com. It's a programming community in New York, and they have basically a space where you can go for what they call a programming retreat. kind of like a writer's retreat. So anyone who is already a coder, whether that's, they've been coding for 2 months or 20 years, they can go and just work on getting better at programming, whatever that means to them. And so the emphasis is on completely following your own nose and a self-directed exploration of whatever topics or technologies, whether it's, new languages, new algorithms to you, whatever it is that you're interested in, you can just follow that in a supportive environment with other people who are also interested in a wide variety of different technology. And it aims to create this really inclusive and really supportive environment that takes away all of the other problems that could get in the way of your learning, all of the kind of that elitism and this idea of experts and that not everyone can learn XYZ technology, not everyone can learn functional programming, or not everyone is smart enough to learn Haskell. All of that just goes away when you create an environment where people are just there to learn and to share what they're learning and to help each other learn new things. And everything is new to somebody at some point.
Mm-hmm. So help me paint a picture here, because I go to resource.com. One of the first things that's on the homepage is it says, not a boot camp.
Yeah.
And it goes through and it explains that it's not a boot camp. Boot camps are built on the same principles as traditional schools, where good teachers and willing students, et cetera, et cetera. And it talks about how it's more community driven, and it also says that it's not a prep program. It's not preparing you for a job. It's, you might get a great new job, but that's not what it is. Help me understand, poking a little bit, how is this not just hanging out with smart people and hoping something good happens?
Well, to a certain extent, and it's not necessarily hanging out with smart people, but hanging out with interested and motivated people who are from a wide range of backgrounds, a wide range of technologies that they work with. Just getting a really diverse but super enthusiastic group of people together in one room can have amazing effects. And so part of the draw is that. And the other part of the draw is that, how many times maybe does someone who's been a professional developer working maybe with the same technology for, 10 years or something, think, oh, wow, I would love to really explore, this new language over there, or I would love to build that app or that game that I've been thinking about, or I would love to get to know this open source project, but I need time and space to sit down and other people kind of to motivate me to sit down and actually do it. And so it's a way to, it's a retreat in that sense. It's a way to kind of, signal to yourself and possibly to the other people in your life or the other people around you that you right now are focused on your own learning. And you're focused on leveling up your skills, whatever that means to you, whether it's, working with a new language, whether it's building something that you've never tried before, whether it's just pair programming with people all day because you have been working by yourself for a while, or whatever it means to you, reading papers, all kinds of different activities that, for different people have, a really positive impact on their learning. Sometimes just having the time and space to dig into that is necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. The structure, the idea that you may have been programming for a year or 10, but to sit down and hone your craft for 3 months, like a writer's workshop, you want to be a better novelist from a coding perspective, which isn't something that necessarily years of practice and years of working isn't going to give you, because it's about sitting down and focusing on that.
Absolutely.
And being a better programmer really focusing on quality. So this is not a co-working space. This is not a boot camp. You do have to have some amount of focus. Like they're not going to make a program for you. They're not going to, by program, I mean, build a curriculum.
Right. There's no curriculum. There's no courses. There's no teachers. It's completely self-directed. So it is, that's not for everybody. And some people would be better off and would enjoy and get more out of a boot camp, of course, but for people who are self-motivated, who have, things that they're curious about, or maybe just want exposure to new things that they didn't know existed, and want to be able to do that all in an environment where the focus is really on creating a safe space for learning where nobody feels dumb because they didn't know something. Nobody feels bad because someone is saying that the technology that they know is inferior to some other technology. Removing all of those problems and just giving people the space to kind of flourish and do their own thing is an amazing effect of this community of the Recurse Center. I think they do a great job of encouraging that. And, they have the motto of the Recurse Center is never graduate. And This is really the idea, is that all of us are constantly learning. Even
we are all amateurs.
Exactly. And we are all students, even the world expert on, a particular language, or the person who wrote the book on a particular framework, even they have things to learn. And, we can all help each other to advance our horizons and come to grips with new problems. And that makes a stronger tech community. It makes us stronger individually. It makes us stronger as a group. And they do a really great job of fostering that community.
So let me push back a little bit then. Not everyone's in New York. Not everyone has 3 months. Not everyone has the money. How do we take the concepts, the philosophy, never graduate, and, always be, educating yourself, find time to be in your own head, and apply that to our listeners who are all over the world and in various stages in their life?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of great online communities that also focus on similar ideals, as it were, or similar guidelines. I personally enjoy, face-to-face contact a lot. So I find myself at a lot of meetups and things like the Recurse Center or conferences. But, a lot of folks get much more out of those kind of interactions online, and finding, Slack groups, Slack channels where they can, find other people that are interested in the same things, or, want to explore the same new territory. And so I think that there are a lot of communities doing that really well out there. And, I think, your podcast is a really good example of that as well. You talk to so many people, all over the world that are doing amazing things, and by bringing them all together in one place for people to find out and kind of, make perhaps a first encounter with those new projects, those new technologies. There are so many great projects like that aim to kind of collect all those amazing ideas in places digitally where people can find them, on their own time.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely people who feel alone in tech, and it's overwhelming to know where to go, where to find a community, to know if that community is a safe space or not, whether they'll be welcomed in that community, and whether that's really, to be a little cliche, the community that's going to feed their spirit, if it's going to give them what they need to move forward. Because I know that technology can be very, very lonely. 2 a.m., you've Googled for the question, you found yourself asking the question, and no answers. You've Googled so much that you've found the end of the internet, gone back to your own blog where you asked the question, and now you're alone entirely. And really, you just need another set of eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, I think these, the amazing communities that grow out of local meetups, that grow out of programs like the Recurse Center, or places like the Recurse Center, where, people go there for a few months, but then they go back home to all over the world, and they kind of bring that way of creating a safe learning space to the people that they interact with on a one-to-one level. That's something, I try and aspire to do in my interactions with people in my local communities. And I think a lot of folks that have recognized that this is a good way to go about doing technology. It's more fun when we do it together. I see that happening all over the place on an individual level. I see a lot of conferences, that come out of kind of spin off of local meetups and try to bring the tech world to the local community, instead of making people travel abroad to find the people to have those conversations with. So hopefully, as more and more people talk about these issues, about how isolating tech can feel, about how terrible it can feel when you think you are alone in banging your head against your computer all night, and how great it can feel when you find someone else to grapple with that with you. I think as more of those conversations take place, hopefully in places like this on your podcast, we'll see even more communities spring up that really try to counteract that isolation.
Mm-hmm. So what have you done in the last few years as you did your 3 months at the Recurse Center, you did your hacker school, and you contributed to open source projects, you worked on even the HTML standard.
Yeah, small contribution there.
It's still, every contribution matters. What has been your area of study and interest in the last few years?
So one of the things that I got really interested in at the Recurse Center, in addition to functional programming and kind of exploring different programming paradigms, is exploring different languages and programming language design, how languages are implemented, the differences between them, the kind of ecosystem of languages out there. When I started coding, I worked in a couple of different languages, but I wasn't really aware of just how many completely different types of languages there are out there. And I find that diversity of, options really exciting, because, for any given problem, there is probably a language out there that you don't know that could solve it better than the one language that you've been trying to, throw at every problem. So I got really interested in programming languages. I started exploring different ones, and I'm always interested in learning new languages, whether programming languages or human languages. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, in my kind of exploration of that, I somehow ended up at a company called Uber Research, which is where I work now as a software developer, and I work on building our own domain-specific language, a custom query language to interface with our data on science research funding. Basically, the funding aspect of how science gets done, where the money comes from, where it goes to, what publications and patents and things like that come out of it. And at Uber Research, we are building a prototype query language, our own, to make interacting with that data as easy and painless and straightforward as possible. And so this is a problem area that I find really interesting, how to, treating languages as interfaces and kind of how to do that interface design, where we're not talking about buttons on a website or something like that, something that's visual, but rather we're talking about, how the language allows you to compose, pieces of text that explain or express what it is you want to do. And that's kind of what we all deal with every day as developers. And I find that a really interesting problem.
Let me ask a couple of questions from my ignorance perspective, from the perspective of my own ignorance, and kind of maybe ask some kind of like surgical questions to get my head around this. When does one know that it's time to make another language versus using an existing one? Because you look at different languages, whether it be a toy language that someone made, like for example, you made a toy language called Kimi.
Kimi, yeah, keep it minimal, yeah.
But when I look at it, and again, no disrespect intended, just speaking from my own ignorance, it looks enough like Lisp that it looks like it's Lisp.
It is a Lisp, yeah, absolutely. So I made Kimi at the Recurse Center just as a toy language to teach myself about how interpreters work. I had never really dug into that question before. I had never really dug under the surface of, what is an interpreter? What does it do? How does it work? So I think, if you're curious about the internals of a programming language, it's time to build a programming language for yourself, if for no one else. A couple of people have found that project helpful as they also learn about languages. I never intended it to be used, in any kind of productive way, neither by myself nor by anyone else. But for me, it was an incredibly educational project, and it really helped me kind of grow my interest in language implementation, and how all the different decisions you need to make there and all the different ways it can be done.
What would you tell people who might look at that though and say, it's so overwhelming, and also what is it going to be used for? Someone might be listening and say, I've got toy projects sitting in my local machine, but I don't want to put it on GitHub because people might look at it and say that it sucks. But at the same time, it's not something that's going to be a product or a project. It is literally a learning exercise. Why should I put my learning exercise out there? Because I guess I'm wanting to know how you would encourage one or tell them that they should, in fact, put their experiment or their toy out there.
I think, if people are comfortable, they absolutely should. I think what you just said touches on a couple of issues. First of all, you mentioned, maybe they're nervous about putting it on GitHub because they think people are going to say, oh, this sucks. We need to stop doing that as a collective, community. We need to stop telling other people that the thing that they built out of interest and curiosity sucks because someone who had more time, maybe more experience, maybe more funding,
PhD.
Exactly, whatever other resources sat down and made something that perhaps has fewer bugs or perhaps can handle some other problem better. That's not the point. We are all just here building cool things, and we should be celebrating each other for that instead of tearing each other down. So that's one thing I think that we all need to do to make it a safer space to just share what you've learned. And I think the reason that I feel it's important for other people to share what they have been learning and the cool toy projects that they've been doing just to explore new technologies is because then if you haven't yet made that first exploration and you see someone else's introductory forays, first testing the waters of a new technology, you can more easily see yourself getting into that new technology. You can see a pathway from where you are now, not having the first clue about whether it be VR, for example. I was just sitting today at the Mozilla All Hands meeting in a session about building VR experiences with A-Frame. Having not the first idea of how to do that and watching one of my fellow Moz Tech speakers walk us through the most basic Hello World VR app, you can say, oh, okay, that's not something that only experts in VR technology can do. That's something that I could start doing right now. And you can see that pathway. And then you build your Hello World app. And then you say, okay, I want to get a little more ambitious. And you build the next thing and the next thing. And who knows, fast forward, that person who just saw your toy project on GitHub, that could have been the first step in them doing the next really amazing kind of quantum leap in that type of technology. You never know. But I think showing those people the path into a new area is really important. And the more we can all do that, I think the better off we're all going to be as an industry, as a community, as individuals. And I think that also goes back to, the talk I gave at JS on Conf, which we were talking about earlier. I think that's one of the reasons that people like that is they can see a path for themselves into this mystical, dark world of magical functional programming. Whereas when they just see talks by, PhDs on category theory or whatever, it's not so clear to see how to get started.
See, now you just gave me something to go and Google because I don't know what category theory is. But you don't need to tell me.
Now, maybe us just talking about it right now, you're going to go, fast forward a few years, Scott Hanselman becomes the world's foremost expert in category theory. You never know.
Baby steps. You know what? True story. Just as you're saying this, it made me realize that even though I think people may know this about me, that even though I've been writing software as a business since 1992, so 25 years, I didn't graduate from college until 2003. And for one of my projects in my junior year, I wrote a tiny OS in C#. This is in 2000. It was May of 2002. And This is before GitHub. This is before Git. I think I have a zip file
Nice.
of this thing. And 12 years ago, I looked at it and was like personally offended by looking at the code that I wrote. So now we are 15 years away from this code. I'm going to see if it still runs and if I can port it to modern C#, and I want to put it on GitHub so I can lean into this code.
That's
that
awesome.
Is now 15 years old. So because you said so, I'm going to put this horrible thing online, and maybe someone will have a kick looking at it, because I know that it compiled once and it did get me out of the class. So I did pass operating systems 312 because of this project.
Well, there you go. It already served more than enough purpose to justify its existence. But I think that's another thing about when people put their, experiments and their little tests up on GitHub or whatever place in public where people can find it. It's kind of like a journal, and you can see progress. I mean, I also have those kind of that reaction of, oh God, I can't believe this code when I go back and look at old things. But that's because I've had a journey, and there was a time when I was really excited that I pressed buttons on my computer and then it did the thing I wanted, even if the code wasn't elegant, even if it wasn't, following best practices, let's say. Maybe it wasn't very reusable, but it did the thing I wanted, and I was excited by that. And now I'm maybe excited by slightly different things where, I get excited about, oh, wow, I found a cool way to test this part of my code or something like that. But if we put all of that in the open, if we all kind of talk about those little experiments and those things that get us excited, then other people can see, wow, all right, they weren't always completely fluent in technology X. They started somewhere, just like I'm starting somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and for coming on the show today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great chatting with you.
I'm going to go ahead and add everything that we talked about to the show notes, and I would encourage everyone to check out Anjana's fantastic talk on functional programming JavaScript, which, if I understand correctly, was not only spontaneous, it was your first public tech talk. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was. It was my first talk at a software conference. Yeah.
And now you're flying all over doing tech talks. So you too can do this kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone has something interesting to say. And so I think that, the more people we see at places like conferences and on podcasts and on GitHub kind of sharing their journeys and their stories and their experience, the better off we're all going to be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.